The rumors just keep coming out about Kent Hughes and the Montreal Canadiens, as apparently they are in for a big move at the draft, according to one insider. But not only that, speaking of the draft, Scott Wheelr and his team at The Athletic have a surprising face going to the Habs at number 5. We gotta get into all that, plus a huge Habs prospect update, including Owen Beck dominating in the Memorial Cup as they head to the finals. But the Habs also lose 3 prospects on this Saturday. There is a ton of news to get into, so you're gonna want to stick around for all of it on this episode of Habs Digest, and we're just gonna get straight into things. And we're going to start with some Habs prospect news. Now, you saw Owen Beck in the intro. We'll get to that. But the first thing I actually wanted to talk about was Jared Davidson. Now, we all saw that he signed, I'm just going to bring this up here, he signed to a 2-year contract, and there were a lot of implications around this. Now, as you guys may or may not know, there was a deadline, Saturday, June 1st, for signing certain prospects to retain their rights, and the Canadiens made the choice to sign Davidson. I'm not going to get into this too much, but what I did want to talk about was an article by Marc Dumont, as he kind of goes over some of the implications of this, and as of this Saturday, we're going to get into this here. So we have Jared Davidson here, but I want to talk about this. The Canadiens opted not to offer their 3 remaining prospects a contract. That means Petteri Nurmi, Miguel Tourigny, and Cedric Gandon are no longer considered property of the Montreal Canadiens organization. And out of these, maybe the most surprising one is Gandon, but I'm going to get into a few of these guys here with you. So let's take a break and let's move into these guys. So I want to start with Petteri Nurmi. Now, a lot of Habs fans have not really talked about Nurmi. You guys might not even know who he is. He was drafted in 2022 as, I don't know if I want to say an overager, but a bit of one for sure, 20 years old, out of the Liga. And he has been quite solid, I must say. Nothing jumps off the page at you. He was a 7th round pick, low risk. He's having a fine career over in Liga, playing 60 games, 16 points. But as a left-hand shot defenseman who's 6 feet tall, there is no room for him in the organization. So unfortunately, he had to be let go. But he's not the more interesting one. I actually wanted to talk a bit about Tourigny, who had some fantastic years in the QMJHL, putting up crazy points as a defenseman. But again, as a defenseman, 22 years old, his highest level of play is arguably the Slovak League or the ECHL, where he was, a bit over a half point per game as a defenseman, which is good, but 5'8", 170, that offensive talent just wasn't there to get him to the next level. You have some defensemen in the ECHL putting up a point per game. Tourigny couldn't hang. But the guy I wanted to focus on most is Cedric Gandon. Now, Cedric Gandon had 57 points in 68 games with Owen Sound this year. He has been playing pretty solid. The problem with him, though, is he's prone to playing really hot out the gate, but not being able to consistently maintain that pace of play. And when you want to make the NHL, when you're 20 years old, you're an overager in the OHL, you certainly need to play at that super high level. So, these guys had some potential. Like, even Nurmi was a guy that I was always kind of checking on under the radar, kind of hoping that he'd be one of those guys that would sneak into the NHL. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be, but despite all this news, the Habs losing on 3 prospects, we still do have Owen Beck, and I'm going to show these highlights once more. They're off to the Memorial Cup final, and I wanted to say something about Owen Beck as well. Now, some people, we know he was talked about as being the best face-off guy in the OHL when he was drafted. We remember that interview. Clearly, he can snipe too. He has 2 goals, 1 assist so far in 4 games in the Memorial Cup. But the biggest most impressive thing to me is his 57 for 74 on the faceoff dot. That's 77% over the last 2 games alone. I'm looking off screen here. 28 for 47 in his last 2 games. He has been insane on the dot. That's wrong. In his last 2 games, he's actually 29 for 37. It's even better. That stat I gave you was his first 2 games. His faceoff percentage is unbelievable. There's a reason the Saginaw Spirit are headed to the Memorial Cup final versus the London Knights. Now, they do have Zane Parekh. They have a lot of other really good players. But Owen Beck, without his play, I don't think they make it there. His solid defensive play. Yeah, he only has 3 points in 4 games against the best teams in the CHL. But his faceoff percentage, his defensive play, they're convincing a lot of Habs fans that he might just get a roster spot next season. So I guess we'll just have to wait and find out. But we got some other important stuff to get into in this video. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was a mock draft done by The Athletic. And hey, yeah, I know, stop me if you've heard that before. We've talked about that a ton on the channel so far. Scott Wheelr, Corey Proman, and the team over there at The Athletic have been doing a lot of great mock draft work, but the most recent one was very interesting, where they did sort of a play a GM mode. Instead of their own mock draft, they were trying to play the GM of these teams to see who they would pick in these certain scenarios. And when they got to the Montreal Canadiens, well, it was certainly interesting. It was Scott Wheeler's pick, and at 5 before, he has picked Cayden Lindstrom, I believe, for the Habs. But this time around, I wanted to show you, he picked Berkeley Catton, and he said there was a couple of defensemen who were actually the best player available at this point. By the way, Demidov was gone. But I wanted to know, Cayden Lindstrom wasn't gone when they picked this. Cayden Lindstrom was actually picked at 9 in this draft. But I digress. Wheelr basically says that they have a clear need down the middle. They have Reinbacher, they have Guhle, they have Hudson, they have Mailloux, they have all these guys. And he actually says he leans Kaiden over Cayden Lindstrom, which is a very interesting choice. Now, when we've talked about Berkeley Kaiden around the Habs, we've heard that like Kent Hughes is not wanting to go get another small player. He wants someone bigger, someone like that. Xhekaj not huge, but he's bigger, I guess. Definitely bigger than Kaiden, who's still thin and small. But Kaiden has that crazy skill. We have heard, though, that Kent Hughes probably isn't going to pick Kaiden. That was directly from Marc-Olivier Beaudoin. Not sure if that's going to hold true, but Wheelr is essentially saying that that talent that Berkeley Kaiden has, you can't pass up. Now, I know a lot of you are probably going to say, and even I said myself, like, my gosh, do we really need another small player to go up there? But Berkeley Katten's potential is honestly so enticing. And while he isn't that Cayden Lindstrom level talent, who we're going to get a bit more clarity on come the draft combine when Cayden Lindstrom is going to be participating in these physical activities. And if everything is cleared, I think he's very much the choice here at number 5. But over a guy like Xhekaj, I would not be upset picking a guy like Kaiden. And I know a lot of you guys are going to disagree. So I want to hear you down in the comments because, look, that top-end skill is going to be tough to find. I think outside of Demidov, I think Kaiden arguably has that highest upside for just pure, point getting that the Habs really need, that elite scoring talent. And while Lindstrom is going to be amazing, a force for years to come if all things pan out, a guy like Xhekaj could very well be as well. Xhekaj could be a force 30-40 goal scorer at the NHL level again if things pan out. A guy like Berkeley Kaiden, he kind of is showing those flashes a bit more. So it's a really, really interesting choice for Scott Wheelr. It's one that makes sense to me. Doesn't fit the typical Habs draft profile that we've been talking about, but I want to hear your guys' thoughts on potentially picking Berkeley Kaiden down below. But we're going to get into the final thing here, and this is maybe something you guys have heard already, but I wanted to talk about this again, and it's the trade rumors are escalating. I know, we've heard all of the trade rumors going around the Montreal Canadiens, but I wanted to talk a bit about what Eric Engels said when talking with Tony Marinaro recently, and take a look at this. So we're going to transition over here. He said, now this is, you can see the ... is where he kind of stopped and picked up, but he said, outside of the players they choose to pick, I just feel like whether or not they achieve it, I think they're out to accomplish something big. And he went on to say, this year particularly, I think they're looking for something big to happen. Now, this is no real surprise to hear that the Montreal Canadiens are out looking for something big at the draft, but to hear this from Eric Engels, a guy who is extremely tuned into the organization, as a lot of you guys know, this is pretty amazing. So he is getting the feeling around the organization that Kent Hughes wants to go for something big. Okay, great. A lot of the times when the insiders drop little tidbits like this, at least in my mind, this means that they have heard something that they can't say outright. Now, that might just be speculation. We hear Arber Basu say something. We hear Eric Engels say something. A lot of the times when they make statements like this, it's like, I get the feeling that this, and he is very adamant about it, you got to think that something big is happening. You got to think that Kent Hughes is out calling and the Habs are looking for a big trade. Now, we've heard lots of rumors. We have said maybe Mailloux could be traded for a star forward. We've seen that in articles, actually, after that video came out. People thinking this exact same thing as us, which is fantastic to hear. We've heard that Kent Hughes has called about Marty Necas. The Zegras rumors are constantly floating around. So, I know the Habs have a big choice to make in the draft, and I know they talked in this podcast about trading the Winnipeg pick as well. That's something, but when I hear that something big is brewing, I get the feeling that Eric Engels has heard, or at least he has some information, that Kent Hughes is looking for that big swing for the fences move, which is not something I actually thought was going to happen this year. I was thinking this is going to happen next year, year after, not really sure, but if the stars align and a star player is available like a Marty Necas, like a Trevor Zegras, like whoever else, I know, have your opinions on these players, whatever, even like a Mitch Marner, that sounds insane, but I'm just saying, like, these kind of names, like, this trade market is starting to get really, really spicy. There's a lot of names that are getting circulated right now, and the fact that Kent Hughes is in the midst of looking to make a big move at the draft, with a lot of teams looking to change a lot of different things, with the Habs having some of the best draft capital and prospect capital in the NHL, and are in the position to make a move, I just think it's the perfect storm. But I'd love to hear from you guys. This is some awesome stuff, some crazy stuff happening around the Habs right now, and I'd love to hear all from you guys down below. But that'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. By the way, if you're still sticking around at this point in the video, I wanted to thank you for your patience over this past week. Travel has been crazy. We haven't been able to schedule our times like normal, and we're very sorry about the lack of uploads. So to the very few, maybe 10% of people that are still here at the end of this video, I just wanted to say thank you for sticking with us, for watching this one, and we plan to get right back on schedule starting tomorrow. Thank you for watching this episode of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate all your support. I've been your host, Josh Gosse. I'll catch you in the next one.